Did you have a specific public in mind for this work?
I guess whenever I make something, the kind of public I have in mind is probably my friends and family, which is not exactly your kind of contemporary art audience, not people who know much about the kind of work and stuff that we get up to here at Goldsmiths. So kind of, yeah, I mean, my brother will just kind of like have no clue about contemporary art, and I guess that I make all work with that in mind, because whenever I go home, he'll just be like, oh, you know, don't make a load of shit that no one understands, you know? And so I guess I always have that in the back of my head, just like make something that people can understand and connect with, whether or not they have anything to do with contemporary art. And I think that I'd be bored if I was making work that was kind of aimed at that audience.
Is it important to the work what your relationship is to the whole realm of meditation and yoga, and what your position is in that?
I think it is important, and maybe something that I've researched more once I started making the relaxation. I guess the first idea came about just through sat with Mariana on the plane, and we were just like reading Grazia magazine and reading this article about Jennifer Aniston getting married, and it was all like the planning for the wedding, and it was just, we were just reading through it, and it was just so kind of sounded like absolute nothing. There was complete nothingness to what was being said, and it was just like washing over you. And I think that that's what started it off, was just like this idea that there's like all this stuff that you read and things like Grazia, or stuff that you watch, and it just completely washes over you, and you really, it is like a relaxing kind of thing, like, oh, Jennifer's getting married and she's sat with her mum and she's planning a wedding and all this stuff, and even down to like the minute details of like, oh, she's got this ring and this, and the flowers are going to be like that, and really it's just absolute bollocks. Like there's nothing of any value or interest in what's being said. And then I guess it's looking back at it and being like, actually what is being said isn't without its own ideology, and then looking into that ideology. And I think where the yoga part and the meditation part comes into it is kind of this crossover that I think yoga, meditation, wellness, all that kind of thing is being co-opted by capitalism, and you know, it's necessary for us to survive the current state of society by being peaceful and calm, and it's really useful for capitalism now to be like, right, we need this kind of meditating, calm way to cope with stuff that is essentially pretty shit. So it's that relationship. I don't personally like, I'm, you know, into meditation and yoga, but I also struggle with this idea that it's kind of being used in a way to kind of like cope with things that we shouldn't be coping with, that we should be pissed off about, and we should be struggling with. And the idea that this kind of wellness movement is like covering up something that we actually should be angry about. So, I mean, there needs to be a distinction between doing yoga and meditation and wellness and all that kind of stuff to cope with personal issues in a daily life, or just coping with things that are shit that we should be angry about.
It sounded like you were talking about acceptance, and that's a big term in Buddhism and yoga. and meditation, that you have to accept everything?
I think acceptance is quite a tricky thing, because I don't necessarily think we should be accepting everything. So I don't necessarily want to learn how to accept everything. And I guess when it comes to things like wellness and the promotion of this in, companies and stuff are all promoting this idea of wellness and meditation and happiness. And I think it's, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing to be doing, because, we shouldn't be accepting everything that's given to us.
In what way, I'm also thinking about the humorous part of the work. Are you thinking about this matter of being critical and being in the system as well?
Humor is a good way to kind of, get people on side with what you're thinking. If someone's like laughing along with something, then they might be laughing along with the humorous part of it, and then get what the ideas behind things are and kind of question those things. I also think that it can be tricky as well, because if you make something just funny, then is the meaning then lost in the humour? Is it just, oh, ha ha ha, go away, that was funny? So I think it's a hard line to walk down. I think I wanted to play with that idea of the different layers of what's going on. So you're led there, and there's like a power relation of you're lying there, someone's telling you what to do, and you're kind of allowing yourself to go into a state of relaxation, and playing with this kind of fight against that halfway through you kind of like realize that it's almost like a trick. And then, so I think, I wanted to play with those levels, and then also you're finding it humorous, so you're also looking upon it like ha 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 in like a knowing, humorous way. But at the same time as it being knowing and humorous, you're also put in a position where you're involved in it, so you can't just laugh at it and go, that's funny. You also have to kind of like question yourself in that position.
What is your relation to feminism?
This piece of work is definitely a feminist piece of work. I think everyone can relate to some of the things that are being brought up, but I think the ideas about image and marriage, and specifically about Jennifer Aniston, is all very geared towards women. And the actual portrayal in the media is, oh my God, Jennifer's broken up with someone again, she's never going to get married again, this is all, it must be so terrible, she must be so unhappy, and all this kind of stuff. When really she's like a rich, successful, beautiful woman who lives in a massive house in Los Angeles. And it's this weird kind of portrayal of the image of her in the media and then her actual life. I mean, I'm not saying she must be happy. They can't accept that she might be happy being alone.
Media has a problem with complex figures, and celebrity culture is all about one-sided image of that person or of that couple.
I think that's an interesting point, because I think the media has to have a story. It can't be multifaceted. It's one way, and it's one image and one portrayal. And then when that's broken in any way, then it struggles massively to cope with it. I think that's what all of my last work was about, that specific point when I was making work about Jade Goody, who is someone in the media who's had like several different lives almost, like being the most hated person, being the most, loved person, those two things, can't people just be a bit both? It's either like absolute hatred or absolute love. And that's like almost psychotic, because no one is like that. No one is like the perfect person or the worst person. And yeah, I think that's a dangerous thing to have as a role model, is not someone who deals with all the different ways of life or all the different troubles that can be put upon you in life, and be like an angry person as well as like a chilled out, you know, California girl. No woman goes through their life kind of being one of these things. You always have these different kind of emotions, especially women have these different kind of emotions hormonally. And I think that as a society we need to accept those different levels of emotion and channel them and use them, because they're useful. They're not useful. It's important to be pissed off sometimes. It's important to be on your period and be like really emotional and like cry at something which you would never normally cry at, because it brings out a way of thinking about things which is totally different to how you think about things in the everyday. And that is not a negative thing. That's a positive thing, and we need to harness that and use that and accept that in the media and accept that in just our everyday lives. Our role models need to reflect that, so we don't look upon us being sad or unhappy or upset as a negative thing.
Is there a role model that somehow reflects this kind of diversity?
I think there's like a new kind of wave of celebrity that's kind of come through in the past few years, say when feminism has become much more of a pop culture topic. So take someone like Lena Dunham and her character that she portrays in her sitcom Girls. That is a multifaceted character. In the media as well, she's not just portrayed in one way, but then in another way you could say she is. So she is just portrayed as like the feminist media representation of a woman who doesn't necessarily fit exactly into what we'd normally accept as a celebrity, because she's not, you know, super skinny and blonde and all these things. So in one way she is accepted, and then in the other way she's accepted as the unaccepted. She's really kind of given that role of you are the voice of all of this kind of person, and then if she doesn't represent everyone, she's like vilified. So Girls, the sitcom for example, it's like, oh, there's no black people, there's no black characters in the sitcom, you're a terrible person, you haven't represented this kind of person. But she's representing way more aspects of femininity than lots of other programs and other things that aren't representing these things at all. So why is she put upon as like a spokesperson? It looks like she's always being criticised.
It's weird that that celebrity culture is like that, because if you take something like film or literature, everything is exactly about the depth of a character and not about the shallow character. And there's been so many rich things written, and in history there's been so many beautiful things made, whereas this almost feels like a kind of fallback from that.
I don't want the difficult part of my work to be trying to read it. I want the difficult part to be after it's been read, and then to like think and question about things in your own life. I want to use these images and these figures and these stories as something that means that people can instantly relate to what is being talked about, and instantly get all the references and stuff that comes from using that image, rather than kind of relating something, say, back to an art context. relating something back to a context which most people are going to get, maybe even people more so out of the art world than in the art world. But then I guess the difficult thing is kind of what's the point of making contemporary art for people outside of the contemporary art world? How are they going to access that? How are you going to make your art go somewhere beyond that little bubble that is the art world?
It sounds like what you're trying to do is to take all these singular, flat parts and use them and make something that's more complex, yet accessible through that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if I got the opportunity to distribute any form of my work in some sort of mainstream media, I don't have an issue with that, because I guess my work is inherently kind of like questioning those things. So if someone wanted to put it in there, then, you know, it's questioning it anyways. By being in it, I don't see that as stopping questioning, that kind of thing. But I don't think there's really, at the moment, a place for contemporary art that challenges that kind of stuff within the popular media. But I guess, it's interesting, like, a photographer recently had an exhibition of photographs of Kim Kardashian, and this exhibition, but because it's of her and Kanye West, it's like instantly in all the mainstream kind of press, is well publicized. So maybe using well-known figures and people like that does instantly give you a kind of like, people are interested in that kind of stuff. Any representation of those things is maybe going to be publicized more than something that isn't talking about that kind of stuff.
And therefore it's very important to play that media in order to reach the public that you would like to have. And so that becomes inevitably part of your art practice, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, you totally hit the nail on the head, like, 'cause I'm definitely using that to access that public. And I don't want to say like that public as in like something separate from myself, because I read that stuff and I watch that stuff, and somehow I've like assimilated that stuff into my artistic practice, so I can almost like justify it in my head, you know. But I'm always aware of this line of like, how much is that a justification and kind of like, oh, I'm thinking about it in this way, so it's fine, and how much am I actually just taking on board all of these things I watch and read and like waste hours of my life kind of looking at. I think the thing is though, is that stuff is meant to be enjoyable. That's the whole point of it. It goes back to this happiness and wellness and kind of like making people accept, like having that stuff there all the time and consuming it and enjoying it is all part of making everyday life a kind of like bearable. You know, bearable makes it sound extreme, but you know, there are very difficult things that are going on, and that kind of media just helps you kind of sit here and accept everything that's going on.